Hello and welcome to Insight Jam, the third annual here at Solutions Review. I'm very excited to kick off the first of 7 panels this week. This one is going to be Cybersecurity in the Era of Remote Work. My name is Jonathan Paula. I'm the Director of Multimedia Production here at Solutions Review, and all week long we're celebrating enterprise tech. And today's vertical is cybersecurity, InfoSec in particular. We have a great group of experts in that space lined up for you for the next 60 minutes. We're going to have a nice conversation. Joe Carson is going to be moderating. Let me bring in these 6 gentlemen now, and we can all begin our chat and introductions. Joe, let's start with you. You can kind of kick off our 30-second introductions, and after that, I'll step out of the way and let you guys just chat and discuss, and hopefully we'll learn something along the way.
Sure, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, and really kind of excited to be the moderator for the panel today. And as Joanna mentioned, my name is Joe Carson. I am the Chief Security Scientist and Advisory CISO at Thycotic Centrify. And vast years experience in the industry, over 25, doing various different things in security. And based in Tallinn, Estonia. So it's a pleasure to be here and really looking forward to an exciting discussion and topic. So I'll pass it over to Joseph. You give us an introduction to yourself.
Thanks, Joe. How you doing, everybody? Joseph Cortez here. I am the Director and Practice Lead for Penetration Test at Align. I also double as the Research and Development Director, so I'm very busy. I spent about 15 years working for the intelligence community, specifically doing electronic research with malware and different sorts of security pieces and bits. And I've worked in a lot of areas of security, and I'm definitely excited to be talking today.
Thanks, Joseph. Vishal, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. Glad to be here. My name is Vishal. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Voltix. We are a cloud security company. We have built a multi-cloud network security platform delivered as a service. We are about 4 years in business. My background specifically has been in cloud networking and security space, being in startups for almost 20 plus years, acquired and been startups, and glad to be here.
Thanks, Vishal. And Paul?
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Joe, for moderating, and thanks, great being with this great group of panelists here. So my name is Paul Mazzara. I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing and Strategy at Savient. And for most of my career, I've been a practitioner working in large enterprises in the financial healthcare sectors, looking at mainly cybersecurity and identity and access management solutions and implementing those and coming up with a integrated architecture. And before that, more recently was at Gartner, covering IGA, Identity Governance Administration, PAM, and now full circle. Now I'm over at Savient on the product side, so I'm really excited to continue, the discussion and continue the journey, on the terms of securing our customers. And my focus is more on the IAM space. I know cyber is kind of a broader topic, but kind of my niche is around the identity governance administration, the privilege access, that piece. But yeah, really looking forward to the discussion today.
Excellent, Paul. It's a pleasure to have you on the panel. And Asif?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us here on this panel, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation with this group of cybersecurity experts. My name is Asif Savas. I'm head of product at Simio. Simio is an identity and access management service provider. Much like Paul, I'm an identity and access management subject matter expert as well. Been in the identity business for over 17 years now, with the inception and build of companies such as Vayu, and moving on to Sun Microsystems, Oracle, and now here part of the founding team at Simio. So identity, we believe, is a key pillar to security, and that will be my my input into the conversation today in terms of how can we secure identities and make the remote workspace a more secure environment for our people and for our enterprise.
Fantastic. And finally, Billy, everyone just gives an introduction of yourself, please.
All right, thanks, Joe. And I'm also happy to be here. I've been in cybersecurity about 15 years. At Motorola Solutions, I ran a SOC for government, state and local to federal government agencies, watching their communication systems. Then I moved to a company called TrustWave, where I ran their global certificate authority. and also a product called PCI Manager, where we helped millions of merchants become PCI compliant through a SaaS offering. And then I spent some time at Thycotic, where I worked on privileged access management, specifically machine identity and access controls. And now I'm head of product at Spirion, where we work on discovering sensitive information. We feel that you can't protect what you can't find, so we find that information, we classify it, and in a lot of cases we can help you remediate it. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. So, today's topic is all about cybersecurity in the era of remote working. And, for many of us, this has become, the mainstay. We've all been working remotely in the past, 12 months to 2 years. And, for me, one thing that's very different is there's a big difference. I've been working remotely for more than 15 years. And there's a big difference between working remotely and working in the middle of a pandemic. That's very different. For many things that, their families are working side by side each other. The kids have been at home as well. So it's a very different experience. But one of the things I want to ask the panel is as the majority of companies have been working, increasing working remotely, we've also seen a massive increase in cybersecurity threats since even the pandemic started. And as remote work becomes almost the normal for most organizations, what's the security teams, what do they need to be looking for when adapting their cybersecurity strategy for working remotely? So I'd like to start off with Joseph, if we can start off with you to get your input, and then we can move it to the other panelists.
Absolutely, Joe. So this is a great topic, and it's actually one that I've provided a lot of feedback over the past year and a half, 2 years. So I'll start off by saying I've also worked remotely for a number of years, and you're right about companies when you are working remotely versus when you are forced to work remotely and you're shuffling to stay open and you're putting solutions on with tape and glue in order to provide remote work. So I believe that's what you're talking about, you have the collaboration tools, you have the solutions and the security pieces in place to work remotely. That's just it. So a lot of companies weren't really ready for remote work. So a lot of the audits and penetration tests that I do, and we have a few thousand clients, from looking at the solutions that our clients have deployed, it really was last minute solutions to support their work. So I would say, with that being said, the solutions really need to be tailored around security and really true remote work, collaboration tools, security. I won't go too deep because I know a lot of the questions that are following, I have a lot of good input to provide, so I'm not going to go too deep on that, but that's my thoughts on that.
Absolutely, you're right. I mean, the past couple of 2 years, organizations have been very reactive to this. It's not something that's been proactive, and it's actually forced many organizations who were not actually cloud centric or actually even having many cloud solutions in place, that it's actually forced their digital transformation to be accelerated very, very quickly, and it's forced them to actually incur a lot of technical debt. And what that means is that they've made short-term solutions to keep their doors open, but not really something that was very strategic to the long-term thinking of the business. And it's also increased a lot of shadow IT as well. We've seen a lot of the businesses go out and actually, basically procure a lot of solutions just to keep the doors open, mostly from that short term, and actually in many cases outside the visibility of IT. So Vishal, I'd like to get your input in the same question. What should security teams be looking at when adapting their security strategy, especially when they're being forced into this situation very quickly?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like we talk to the customers all the time, right? Pre-COVID, cloud was default. However, post-COVID, what has changed is like things like PBX, things like IT. IT is in the cloud, and default is in the cloud. The attack surface is much greater in the cloud. The tool sets are less. The organizations are still taking their on-prem tool sets to the cloud, and the talent is less in the cloud as well. I mean, suddenly COVID hit, and they had less talent. So now the enterprises have to learn the talent fast. They have to use the right tools, and definitely they have to be careful in not just taking their on-prem mindset to the cloud. And that's, I think, the biggest thing we hear from customers. Like, don't take like your I call them like going to a Tesla factory and taking your horses and nails kind of stuff. So don't bring them. So bring a new mindset and new knowledge. And that's the only way to do well in the cloud.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things is that when a lot of organizations have been doing this balance between, it's a balance between productivity and maintaining security. In a lot of cases, security is an afterthought. But you're right. As organizations are accelerating the transformation and move to cloud solutions to keep the doors open, what we have seen is that they're trying to retrofit the existing on-premise strategy and configurations to cloud, which doesn't effectively work, and it actually makes the security posture much more weak and actually open to security threats. Paul, I'd like to get your input on the same question as well. Any thoughts or any insights from you?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've always been a proponent of kind of a multi-layered approach, and that looking at your security posture from every layer of the stack, so to speak, from your operating systems to your software, your network, and all the way up into your identity and vetting and everything involved with how you actually know that person on the other side who's accessing your systems is who they say they are, right? And I think in the case with the pandemic and that remote work, and I'm similar to you guys, I haven't been working remotely as long as you, Joe, but probably about the last 5 years, and it's definitely a challenge in terms of that less face time and interaction time from face to face, talking in front of the water cooler type thing to now everything is through chat. And so there's that kind of also the human aspect of it, I think about in terms of just making sure, and I was a manager for quite a bit of time as well, is how do you make sure that you're still in touch with your employees and actually know what they're going through and helping them to remain productive and whatever other challenges they're going through, making sure that they have the right access, of course, to be productive, but then they don't have too much access. So it's always that balance between, as we've heard, least privileged access, right, or just enough access. So I know there's a bunch of buzzwords out there around that, but it's really a true, a true statement in that we want to give just the right amount of access, but always make sure that it's not too much, because even if there's no malintent, there's always that mistake that can happen. And in the era of the cloud, we can make one little mistake in our management console and blow away 30, 35 cloud instances or virtual workloads out there with a push of a button. Unlike back in the day, you had your physical devices that, okay, the blast radius could maybe be a box, that hardware fails or someone gets in, and you could, deal with that pain or deal with the consequences of that. So I think it's a concept, it's kind of a progression of where we came from, but it's exacerbated so much more with the pandemic that, now everyone's remote, so we can have less trust in how people are remotely coming in, what devices they're using. So it's just made the problem worse, I think, over the past few years. So we have to be extra diligent.
Absolutely, you're right. I mean, one of the things that kind of, as organizations, to Vishal's point, is that they try to put their existing on-premise security into the cloud, which means that for a lot of systems, simply a password is the only protection for many organizations. And to your point as well, is that cyber criminals they're targeting that. They're targeting the people that's basically accessing, and basically stealing credentials has been one of the top attack vectors and abusing their identities. And then it used to be that when you're monitoring the network traffic, you used to have a very close eye on the inbound traffic from the public internet. But the public internet has become almost an extension of everyone's network, meaning that all traffic is coming from the public internet. So it's very hard to decipher what is actually abusive, malicious content. What's abusing those credentials. This has become a major factor that many organizations really have to start really looking into the details. I've seen so many organizations become victims of ransomware simply because they put an RDP port public facing to keep working, to keep productive. And that's become a major attack vector. I'd like to get Asif's input as well.
I was just going to touch on what you were talking about right now, Joe, right? I think organizations have designed security with the assumption that most of their users are going to operate within their physical premises, right? And that security architecture had a number of layers associated with it. There's the whole physical access control part of it as well, that controlled who was within my premises and who could plug into my network and then basically authenticate and consume the various applications and services the enterprise provided. There was always a very small set of users, right? Either you're a flexible worker or a manager and so on, who had a laptop, who then had maybe a VPN type connection into the enterprise, and they were trained on how to operate and educated in terms of how to consume enterprise services while working remotely. But what happened with COVID was that everybody became a remote worker. So we had a huge population force that was not equipped and trained to operate in that capacity. So enterprises were really forced to go down the path of how do we, first move this entire workforce to be a remote workforce, which meant procuring the devices and so on to get them provisioned with access to laptops and other assets so they can first connect into their networks. Then they had this whole challenge with everybody VPNing in, and that's not a scalable solution. And we're now, as security experts, we're talking about how zero trust network access and so on should really be the evolution of access to enterprise asset, right? So yeah, we were all caught off guard, and I'm sure we all have examples of customers that our respective organizations have jumped in and scrambled to help them get past this hurdle. But as security leaders, I think it's important for us to really look at designing our security architectures with the user in mind, design around the user, and assume that this remote working model is going to continue, and access to enterprise services, from anywhere, any device at any time is going to be the norm. And how do we build our security ecosystem around that, right?
Absolutely. Just kind of one of your comments, zero trust has been one of the big trending buzzwords that we've heard in the industry quite a lot. And for me, I'm not a big fan of the naming of it. It's kind of always counterproductive to what we're trying to do. I prefer to call it something like, continuous verification. But even more recently, in panels that I've done in the past, I've got to be calling it zero security assumptions. It's about not having zero trust, but it's about assuming not having anything security controls in place. You want to make sure you do that continuous verification. So you're absolutely right. This the basis of where we need to be moving towards to getting to where security is not reactive. It's more proactive against future threats. It's continuous. Billy, also like to get your kind of input on the same topic as well.
Yeah, thanks. So I knew that this panel would have some great insight on how remote work has affected cybersecurity. And obviously, the entire reason we're having this conversation is because there's been this huge leap in attacks. And we just assumed that it was all due to remote work. But I actually have wondered how much of that is correlation versus causation. And I specifically think about email. Like, email is a complete security disaster. I remember like the Verizon breach report in 2019. It's like 80% of all malware on a corporate network got on there because of email. And then they had another statistic that was very similar, like around 80% of all breaches started with credential loss, or there was lost or stolen. And I'm like, okay, well, 80% they downloaded malware directly through email. And the phishing side of things, the credential loss side of things, probably a huge chunk of those were because people were phished in email. And then that doesn't even count things like business email compromise and other attacks through email. So then I think back, okay, 2016 was when the Democratic National Convention was hacked. And, Leon Panetta was one of those, and it was through email. And if I'm a cyber criminal, I'm thinking, okay, I could go hire this computer genius or a set of computer geniuses that are going to find a 0-day and figure out how to exploit it. And then, it's going to be fixed with a patch eventually. So there's this huge investment, a limited amount of time in theory. Or I could hire a lot of people who can just sit around and dream up ways to get people to click emails. And so I wonder if, clearly a lot of the challenges and the attacks are due to remote work. But I think also a huge part of them are just email. Like, people realize that this is such a fantastically easy way to get to people. And it goes back to, people are your weakest link. And how so many things change, but a lot of things stay the same. Protect your credentials, educate people.
Yep. I think you're getting one of the things is that in a lot of attacks, they're not using just one technique. There's multiple techniques used, and we look at the correlation of how the combination of those techniques are used. And I think the MITRE ATT&CK framework is a really good example of how you can see the correlation of multiple techniques used in a single campaign. So, using phishing is one way to get people, to give over their credentials. A lot of cases, security incidents or breaches is resulting basically from stolen, abused credentials that people are unaware that have been stolen. And then they move into other attack methods as well. So they want to move into the next part, and this is really where we think about, with the increased number, of people working remotely. Now, what's happening is it's almost an extension of what we refer to as the BYOD, the bring your own device and connectivity, and cloud working and remote working. I like to kind of refer to the term is now it's really about bring your own office. And with bring your own office, is employees basically, employees' homes are now an extension of the corporate networks. And in all of the devices, you think about the number of devices that's in those people's homes and networks. That means that the potential of the number of devices now connecting to corporate networks is, it's accelerated extremely. So in this kind of phase where we're thinking about what's kind of really happening with these new number of devices and endpoints connecting into business networks, in this kind of bring your own office kind of scenario, how can security teams stay effective? How can they make sure that all the devices that are connected to the network are secure and the network remains protected? I know it's getting to the point, one of the things that, Joseph had mentioned earlier about, the targeting of the people, the human side of things. We're really relying on them to protect the organization's network. So, Joseph, I'd like to get your input on that scenario, and that question about the number of devices and endpoints, and also about the security of the people that's connecting in.
Absolutely. Another really good question. Thanks, Joe. So I see this a lot as the practice leader of a penetration test division. We see companies that years ago were traditional in the office. Now they're a hybrid model. They're not really set up to be a hybrid model, and the vulnerabilities and the penetration test report reflects that. So, I give a lot of guidance on environments that we see that are riddled with new vulnerabilities based on the remote work situation. But really, it's really not going to change. I think that this is going to be the new way that things are. A lot of companies that weren't ready for cloud, I really do urge them to get ready for that, because in the end, a lot of the legacy VPN solutions, and I'm just trying to throw little tidbits of info because I can't disclose too much, but a lot of solutions again are tape and glue. So insecure VPNs, open RDP. I mean, that was one that you said with the ransomware. We actually handled a couple of ransomware incidents, and it was basically the same symptoms. So I would say to really stay secure and evolve with everything that's going on, you need to have a really ironclad policy, base it on an acceptable framework, such as one from NIST. In fact, I'm going to throw this tidbit out there again, but I won't elaborate too much. There's a NIST publication, and we actually did a questionnaire around it. It was the NIST 846, the Enterprise Guide to Remote Telework, and it actually describes a lot of the ways that you can really secure and harden the environment based on remote work. But have your security tools, have a great policy, lay out the groundwork for a policy, because that's pretty much paramount. But definitely have security tools that could provide visibility to your data and classification and control of your data. I'm throwing that DLP reference out there for a DLP tool, but I would say in this age of remote work now, you really need visibility and control of the assets, as you touched on MDM. But really, what's the crown jewels to a hacker? It's the data. So you need to have control and visibility of that data, where it is, and how everybody remotely is using it.
Absolutely, spot on. Vishal, I'd like to get your thoughts as well.
No, I think, Joe, in this new world, it's all about access is from anywhere. As you said, some home, coffee shops, everywhere, right? That's where the access pattern is, and the apps are in the cloud. The business network is in the cloud, right? So I see the security as being like four things. One is like connectivity and security of the endpoint. Second is how do they secure to the cloud? And the third is like security of the cloud. Of that one, I would say like the AWS, Azure, all the cloud providers do a good job. I think the biggest confusion, where I think you touched upon some things as well, is also about security of your crown jewels, your apps in the cloud. You touched upon network. Like for example, if you use the network, right? I mean, network is perimeterless in the cloud. I mean, you can really there's no defined perimeter. It's more dynamic, and if you use the old tools, you can have ingress, egress. You can let movement everywhere, right? So that's where, and I think Joseph touched upon, you cannot secure what you cannot see. So visibility tied to the control. I think the key aspects, a lot of the enterprises I see missing is, oh, I only want visibility, but then the gap in the control cannot be like a long, because a 10-second gap means you're on the internet now and you lose all data. So the tight coupling of visibility and control, especially for securing your apps, your crown jewels, your data in the cloud, accessed by the users, I think that's like the key of the how things can take care of in the cloud.
Absolutely.
A lot of challenges.
Absolutely. So I want to move over to Paul. Paul, one of the things I've got, the extending to this, where we're kind of looking at, as I mentioned, to bring your own office, and organizations really relying, heavily now is what they still have control of. Where is that perimeter? Is there a perimeter that still exists? And I really kind of, for me, I think the perimeter really, is getting into where the identity is the factor that you still have visibility over. And important also to what Joseph mentioned about the data and access has become, the new security control that organizations still have the ability to manage. So I'd like to get your input or thoughts on the same topic.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I was just thinking of, we've lost control really of the endpoint, right? I mean, back in the day, you had, agents, you had, the company-owned devices and managed devices. So we just can't no longer assume that we're going to be controlling those devices with an agent and have that low-level kind of control over what the security posture of that device is through agents, right? Because, as you said, bring your own office. Who knows what types of devices and equipment people are using? So the next best thing is to be able to monitor, discover those workloads and those identities, to have that visibility as to who those people are, what types of activity are they doing, what's their kind of normal behavior, kind of, there's so much information you can't monitor and kind of humanly understand every activity that's going on, but you could kind of look for patterns and understand what normal behavior is, and potentially look at things that look strange and or abnormal, or atypical of a person, in a particular role that's doing something in the middle of the night or from a different location. So that's kind of where this identity governance, I think, comes in, is having that visibility, as was been said in the panel. Can't manage the things that you can't see. So having that visibility, knowing who has all access to what are they doing with it, is it appropriate? And then from there, if you have that visibility, then you could deal with things like, remote workforces. You could deal with third-party access, where you have people that come and go that you don't even know if they've left that company and went to somewhere else. And we all know that a lot of these breaches are from vendor third parties, right? Where we don't really have that control of those individuals. So again, it's all looking at first, accountability, right? Trying to have someone to sponsor that third party and maybe even push some of that responsibility to the vendor and to administer those identities, but always, checking to make sure that those people are still working. And some of that is by verifying yourself. Is there an activity? Has that user been logging in recently? If not, let's cut the access off. So I think definitely that's going to be how we could better manage, because in terms of scale, it's not going to be like anything we dealt with before, when we had control over our devices, right? So it's going to be in the millions of devices and locations. And as you said, the internet now is, everything's coming in from outside the network versus inside our perimeter. So the best we could do is monitor and just try to put some analytics and intelligence around seeing where maybe the soft spots are. And like was said, crown jewels. I think that's the first thing you got to do is protect those crown jewels. Look at your privileged accounts and users and really double down on those. You know, 'cause that's where the attacker gets a hold of a privileged account, and then they can move laterally, and then the show's over at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. One of the things is that, it used to be where there was less devices, in the organization's employees. So you wouldn't have a device per employee. You would manage the devices. But now the devices have accelerated to being, one employee might have 7 or more devices. So it gets into where it's more easier to manage one identity that relates those devices together. So absolutely. One thing is I just want to kind of move into the next question, which I'll kind of also add to Asif as well. So Asif, one of the things I'd like to kind of cover is from, employee side of things, is not every employee is a security professional, and we shouldn't expect them to be security professionals. So one of the things is how can organizations make sure that those non-security personnel that's using the devices, remote employees, how can we make sure that they're staying educated, up to date, and making sure they're actually following, security best practices? So Asif, I'd like to kind of get your input on that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Joe. I think employees always mean well, right? And the key fact for us as security people to understand is, we end up always blaming the user, right? Or whatever other acronyms we come up with saying, this is a user issue, right? But I think it's important for us to ensure that we are enabling the user to ensure that the tools that they have, the devices that they have are protected, and they are enabled to use the assets that will get them most productive for what they do, right? So in terms of doing that, I think it's important for the organization to make that user experience better, right? We want them to see security and IT as an enabler, as opposed to a detractor or the no guy for anything they want to do. Hey, this device best works for me, or I may have an accessibility issue and I might need some additional tools in this whole environment of bring your own office that enables me to get the results that the organization needs of me. So more, what we end up seeing is organizations are looking at things in different silos. I think we have, we look at everything as endpoints, right? Endpoints are devices, and we look at managing through endpoint management solutions and endpoint security solutions. The user is an identity, and enterprises look at managing the user through identity management solutions. As enterprises, I think it's important that we bring the user and their endpoints together to get a holistic view of who the user is, what are the assets that they use to access our enterprise services, and let's make sure that those devices that we use, we are able to trust them, based on there are multiple tools out there that can help us build a trust model for these devices. So when a user is coming in from a trusted device, from a trusted geolocation, we give them the access that they need. And when there are behaviors outside of this trusted models, then we inhibit them, right? So as an organization takes a more a view or a model of enabling users and their devices, I think users will also get more educated in terms of, hey, these are my policies and this is how I comply with them. And being out of compliance has its own repercussions, right? Maybe you go through a training, right? So I think it's important that we enable the right behavior with the right policies and the right tools, as opposed to blaming our end users for everything.
Absolutely, completely agree. Just Billy, would you like to add anything to this one?
Yeah, I think you guys have hit on some great points. The big thing is that all your business leads, whether it's head of HR, head of finance, they need to make it clear to their employees that they have access to very valuable data. I mean, I think a lot of times people just assume that this IT's problem or the security team's problem, and so they have to know that this is important. And then a key thing people have talked about is identity, right? Like I have to know who has access to what. And a lot of times we'll say, okay, this person in HR should have access to the information in, say, Workday or whatever the case may be. And that's great. We set up all our policies around that, and we make sure that they identify it with them. And then the person working from home, to bring it back to that, well, they have access, but they need to get that data and they need to do an analysis. And so they can't do exactly what they want to do in Workday. So what do? They download it to their endpoint. And now that data is sitting there. And all the identity management we did around it just went out the window because they moved it on us. And so at Experian, we really emphasize you can't trust that you know where the data is. You have to scan for it constantly. So we're saying scan your cloud repositories, scan your local databases, and scan your endpoints. And we have customers constantly telling us, oh, just the other day, somebody from HR downloaded every employee social security number to their laptop. And so we saw that with Experian. We went and identified that with them and talked to them about it, and said, hey, if this is, first of all, you're breaking policy. If this is something that you need, to Ashit's point of, we can't just be to know people, but then we got to work and say, okay, this person does have a real business use for this. We're going to slow them down a lot, but it's still very valuable. So now maybe we should put some of those identity and more security around their laptop and adapt that way. I think it's key that people realize that this isn't just security or IT's problem. This is everybody's problem.
Absolutely. It's a great point. Security should follow the data. It shouldn't just be based on basically where it's located. It should follow it all the time. Anyone else from the panel would like to contribute to this one? To this question? Joseph, I think you had some interest in around the human side of things.
Definitely running a penetration test division, I can tell you. We are very successful in doing different phishing attacks. Whether it's the CEO, I'm about to go on a plane and I'm not going to give away all of our secrets, but we have a lot of good tricks in our sleeve. It tends to be the ones that work very well. Yes, the human element's always the weakest element. I do think that we should strengthen security policies. I definitely agree with our panel on we need to amp up the security policies and the tools and not scrutinize the human element too much, but we have to remember that the humans are definitely going to make mistakes. There needs to be layers of security, as I call it, and some safeguards in place to stop that. But definitely not going to see that go away. We're definitely going to see an increase of phishing attacks continue.
Oh, absolutely. It's easier to ask the employees for their credentials than it is to try and get a 0 day. That's for sure. And one of my favorite ones I used in the past during penetration tests was using phishing campaigns that targeted with speeding tickets. Speeding tickets leverage a lot of those kind of main points, which were, fear of doing something illegal. There was the financial element that you had to do something quickly, otherwise the fine increased. And there was also timing. It was timing. You had to do it, urgently. So a lot of kind of different mechanisms, but cybercriminals are great at coming up with very creative ways to try and get us to hand over credentials or to do something or click on something that ultimately will provide them an initial kind of foothold in the organization's devices. So I'd like to move it into kind of into the security defensive side of things and think about when companies are looking to secure these hybrid remote employees, whether it be in supply chain or employees. What should you be looking for in the security tools? What things should you be looking out for? What's the criteria requirements you should be thinking about? So I'd just kind of like to probably get Vishal, your input on what things or requirements should they be looking for from a security tool?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think as we talked earlier, right? I mean, you're going to the cloud, you need to bring tools that are cloud native, right? I mean, the main thing we need to remember, and I think we touched upon something, security cannot be the no person anymore, right? The cloud movement happened because of applications, because of the business agility, right? In the past, security used to be the no person. In some sense, like kind of the tail that wags a dog. It has to be now the other way around. Security has to follow, and the application developers have to be enabled, right? So if you take any old tools built for the old world where we talked about like change control, I think we touched upon a topic like on a change of a button in the cloud, you can do a lot of things, right? So in the cloud, there's no change control. It's all about agility. It can't be compromised when you secure your cloud. So my guidance to all the companies is like, don't bring your horseshoe and nails to a car factory, right? Don't just bring in your old mindset, old tools to a new environment like cloud. Think cloud native. That's, I think, the basic stuff I'm talking about. Fundamentals.
Absolutely. I'd like to kind of get Joseph, if you can give us some on this one as well, please.
Absolutely. So running the global incident response program and insider threat and DLP, I can tell you I've seen my share of stuff. I've seen agents stop checking in. I've seen compliance issues, just A to Z. And knowing what I know now, I can tell you that companies, when they deploy tools, a lot of times they'll buy a tool based on one feature, but they won't look at what tool really matches what they need. So you need to look at tools and understand what your environment is and what it needs and what layers of security are going to be used to keep assets safe and data safe. And you need to have a portfolio of tools that supports that. So, do you have an incident response tool and forensics tool and a tool that can do control of data, a tool that can do discovery? So, use your tools and lay them out in an efficient manner that you can get the coverage and the functionality that you want. I've seen a lot of organizations, they just buy a lot of tools and they think that that's going to give them that security, right? If they have all these tools on the machine, they'll be able to overcome security. Well, I can tell you right now, there was 3 endpoint solutions, the best in the business, and you've heard of all these 3 names. I'm not going to say them. I was able to create certain pieces of malware that was able to get past and deeper than I thought. So the protection wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And this is in me evaluating what protection I wanted on endpoints. So, my advice is utilize tools, but understand what you are going to do with them and the layers of security that they can provide.
Absolutely. Think long term. It's all about, solutions, and so security can no longer be silos. It has to be basically solutions working together to add value between each other. I'd like to kind of move the same question over to Billy as well. So Billy, I'd like to get your input on the same.
Sure. One of the things that I've seen is a huge reliance on VPN. Oh, they VPN'd in, I'm done. And I'm like, well, okay, that protects your communication channel from your endpoint to, wherever you're going to, the corporate network. But now that computer is on the home network, and that computer can still be attacked from every, aspect on that home network. And if you think about the NotPetya or WannaCry, how, of course, first they get on the network through email, but then they could use the Eternal Blue vulnerability to lateral across that network. And so if your kid downloaded this ransomware, then it could lateral over to the work computer, even if it has a VPN. And so then you think, okay, well, Windows has updates for that. If I keep them patched, then that'll work, for those specific threats. But then now your kid is downloading say music or videos from a P2P network, and that's a disaster, right? Because now what makes a P2P network so great for file sharing is a perfect distribution source for viruses. So, your IP is broadcast to that entire mesh network, and they got to open right through the firewall. So then it's like, okay, well, I was thinking about this a lot. I'm like, I think the future might be like if you have remote employees, you might have to hand them a firewall and say, plug this in to your home network and plug your computer in it, and then block all the other ports or put port protection on all of them, so that computer is only, blocked from all the home threats. So I think that's a huge aspect of remote work that, I don't think the VPN covers and people maybe don't think about.
Absolutely. And I mean, as myself, I've been a penetration tester for quite a long time. And one of the things I love to do is live off the land. So one of the most important things I recommend companies to do is when you put security solutions in place, make sure you also secure the security solutions, because otherwise the attackers will leverage them and actually use them to their advantage if you're not protecting them as well. So it's really important to make sure you're actually, doing it multi-layered and really doing a thorough approach, of securing everything, not just, using security solutions and then putting weak credentials to protect your SIEM or your endpoint protection and so forth, or your software delivery. I've seen attackers actually trying to deliver the malicious software using organizations' own software distribution, so they didn't even have to do it themselves. Asif, I'd like to get your input as well on the same question.
Yeah, we often find a number of enterprises looking at tools as the end solution for most problems, and then they end up with tool sprawl, way too many tools to solve the same problem, or a whole gamut of tools that are all inappropriately installed, configured, managed, and maintained, which is basically gives you a perception of security, but really you're not any more secure than your last tool purchase, right? So our suggestion, our recommendation that we take to our customers is look at what you already have within the enterprise, right? You most likely have the tools already. um, it's all about working with the right set of experts. A managed service provider may be able to assist with that, right? Come in, look at the tools that already have been implemented in the organization, assess where the gaps are. Maybe sometimes it's feature function, sometimes it's more a policy gap that has been implemented. Have them assess that and make sure that the tools that you have in place is giving you the right telemetry to capture the anomalous activity, and for you to be able to react and remediate those situations. And often, definitely, the tools are there. You might have a situation where the tools are not working well together or talking to each other, and then there are some good SOAR products, security orchestration technologies that can bring the tools together to make sure that the data sets that you're getting from the various tools all make meaningful sense, or you're going to have a whole island of tools that are solving point solutions, but not really converging to get to the end goal of securing the enterprise.
Absolutely. I want to move into one of the next questions, which is really, for me, remote work has been the path we've been going on for a long time. The pandemic has definitely accelerated it. It's the direction we were going. It's just brought it quite a few years, forward. And organizations, as they're really looking to reevaluate their security strategy and the structure of the security, and the tool set, what can they do to accommodate this continuous move to remote working? And that's going to be here to stay. We're seeing a massive change in employees who are actually now leaving organizations and looking for companies who are maintaining that flexibility. So they'll do maybe 3 days in the office and the rest of the time they work remotely. They're really looking for that flexibility. So what should organizations do in order to make sure they have the ability to evaluate and change to meet that new structure and strategy? Paul, I'd like to pass it over to you first for this one.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as we've been talking about that lack of visibility due to this remote work situation where we don't have employees in our offices on our devices, that I think is even more important to move towards that kind of just-in-time access model, right? So where we are not leaving all these standing privileges that are subject to compromise. And so we're taking that approach to that. I know we've said zero trust is sort of a buzzword, but when I think of zero trust, is that zero implied trust, that so we don't always assume that once someone has been given access that they should continually need it. That's why we're moving towards a more continuous evaluation of risk and trust. And with that, I think if we're able to, from the beginning, only give time-bound access, and or if there are standing privileges, to be able to evaluate based on usage, and if someone's changed the role in the company, or for whatever reasons their risk posture has changed, then we should look towards removing that level of access. And so that could apply not just at the application layer, which tools like Savient look at the kind of fine-grained access of your critical applications, and removing that sensitive access and then only activating it when it's needed. But then also maybe even at the network layer, that ZTNA network layer access, as someone, I think Vishal commented about the VPN, right? So you're making sure that the access is available only to those machines on the network that you need. So I think definitely organizations have to take this approach for remote work. And tools of yesterday, as was alluded to, might not, a great tool that was developed 10 years ago may not be the same tool that's going to work for today, right? It has to be a cloud native, microservices architected, scalable solution that understands, the cloud, right? And that eventually at Gartner, we were talking about cybersecurity mesh and some of the emerging kind of ways of architecting solutions and being able to plug things together and that orchestration that I think someone referred to. So whatever solution you're looking at, make sure that they do have a modern architecture. They're moving in that direction.
Absolutely, yeah. For me, it's spot on. The principle of least privilege. People have to move to the least privilege they need to do the job successfully. I've referred to it in the past as moving away from having persistent privileges to what most organizations give their employees entitlements, to moving to non-persistent privileges, meaning just-in-time privilege or just-in-time access with continuous verification. I'd like to move the question over to Vishal to get also your thoughts on this topic as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like on these things, as you talk about VPNing, so old tools are not going to work, right? So the enterprises have to remember that even the post-COVID, the remote work is here to stay. And we talked about, one of the members talked about, like, yeah, you can't have like a firewall to your each device, right? I mean, and we talk about like at our company, Voltex, like all the time, like things like access, think about like firewall has to become more like a verb in this new environment. Like it has to be firewalling, right? You cannot just say put boxes everywhere, because you cannot in this new world where, as I said, the apps are in the cloud, and the cloud is multi-cloud, distributed nature, and the access is anywhere. You have to become, security has to be like more ubiquitous and built in the fabric itself. And that's the only way you can provide security. And the second thing is talked about the right hygiene. I mean, I think we talk about folks leaving, the great resignation. I mean, so security is a process, not a product. So make sure you have the right processes in place when the employees are offboarding, onboarding. And that's what enterprises have to take care of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Asif, any thoughts from you?
No, I can't agree more with what my fellow panelists have suggested. So I agree with everything that's been said.
Absolutely. And Joseph, any thoughts?
Yeah, a lot. So again, when we see companies, they come to us with this exact same question. And my big thing is we need to understand what your threat surface is. So when I say that, not only your external public threat surface, but what does it look like inside? Then we can determine what sort of solutions and where we start, where we want to go. But definitely a program to do internal vulnerability scanning is critical to understand how that threat surface evolves. Also, routine pen tests. And when I say routine, a certain compliance can dictate that depending on how many times. I know Billy worked the PCI side of things, so he understands those compliance requirements very well as far as vulnerability scanning, pen test, and segmentation testing. But definitely a pen test to determine your threat surface, because that's going to be the same tools and tactics that a threat actor uses. You're really going to discover where your holes are, what your tools are doing for you, and how vulnerable you are. So I would say that a good pen test program, a good vulnerability program should really be a staple in your plan to, as we move forward with this remote work, because, let's face it, there's a lot of, it's like the Wild West right now.
Absolutely. So, and Billy, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think a key thing that people are kind of converging on is we used to have our compliance once a year, so we work on it during that time and then not worry about it till the year later. And the idea of continuous compliance has been around for a while, but I think now it's as critical as ever. And it's not just remote work, because everybody's moving around. They're at home and they're at the office and they're in the cloud, but also because of the cloud and the hybrid assets are everywhere, not just the people. So it's a continuous thing. It's not just like we can just do this one time and move on. We can't just do a pen test now and move on. We have to scan for data. We have to figure out where the data is. We have to follow this data around with security, and it's an ongoing process. Just like Vishal said, it's a process, not a product.
Absolutely, we really have to get to where security works in the background and it's usable. Where in the past has been all about complexity. It's about difficult. It sometimes takes months to install. We have to get to where security is getting value from basically, minute one when it's basically enabled and used, and then making it usable for all users. I'd like to get some final thoughts. John, do we have any questions from the audience at this time, or should I just get a quick round table from, final thoughts from the panelists?
Yeah, great conversation, gentlemen. I've been listening with intent this whole time. With only a few minutes left to go, though, I would love to just have everyone a final goodbye and quickly tell the audience where they can find you, what we'd like to promote, what solution you'd like them to look up. Joe, we can start with you. Go right now.
Absolutely. So, I definitely recommend anyone who's really looking to get into, when we talked about a lot about identity and privilege access. So definitely recommend to go to thycotic.com, take a look at our solutions, our white papers, and we have a lot of educational content. I myself am the author of Privileged Account Management for Dummies. So if you're interested in getting a quick read and getting something up to speed, highly recommend going to the website and taking a download. You can follow me on social media as well. I do share a lot of my research to the public, so I'm happy to keep in contact with you in the future. Joseph, yourself?
Yep. Thanks, Joe. So Align, we do SOC, ISO, FedRAMP, PCI, high trust, and privacy audits. I know that that's a mouthful. Me specifically, I'm the penetration test practice lead, and I also double as the director of research and development. So if you need a pen test or anything pen test related, I will be more than happy to talk you through that. I'm the threat surface expert.
Fantastic. And Billy.
All right, thanks. Yeah, at Experian, we like to think that knowing where your data is the intersection of both security and privacy. It doesn't matter which framework you're talking about, if it's GDPR or NIST, you have to know where your data is because you can't protect it if you don't know that. So, a lot of compliance products start out with, handing surveys out. Here HR, here finance, here's, sales. Tell me where your data is. Well, they don't know definitively. The only way you can really know is to run a scan and find that data.
Absolutely. And Vishal?
Yes, we at Voltix do multi-cloud security. So if you're running your applications in the public cloud, AWS, Azure, OCI, GCP, and you want to secure them, as I always say, you cannot secure what you cannot see. So what we offer at Voltix, like we have a free tier and a free trial. We run an assessment through of your accounts, give you all your threats in your account and might map them to like MITRE framework and things like those. And then you can immediately protect them using a single click. So as I said, security should be easy, should be following the business. So if you have any questions, you can go to voltix.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn and ask me any questions. So yeah.
Fantastic. Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah. So Savient, definitely check out the website there. I've also written a number of blogs on the zero trust. One aspect I did say there about that zero trust is a mindset. So I think in the era of remote work, you always have to be thinking that always challenging and thinking about whether that access should be appropriate. So Savient helps with that to scale and solve that problem. When you have thousands of users and applications, so that governance, who has access to what, and then the privilege access too is protecting those critical workloads, those users. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear from you. I'm on LinkedIn, so a lot of times I publish things through there. And yeah, great talking with all of you.
Absolutely. And Nassif?
So we at Simio believe the user is at the center of security, and the user is actually an identity. And what Simio does is help enterprises be successful with their identity programs, regardless of tool, technology, or product. We are an identity management MSP, so we can help you successful both with your existing identity program or with a new program that you would like to initiate. So check us out, simio.com, and we'll be happy to assist.
Awesome. Many thanks. It's been a fantastic discussion. I think the audience is really going to get a lot of value from this. So, John, over to you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Again, that was a great discussion. If at any time you came in late, if you're on YouTube, you can just scrub backwards to the very beginning. If you're watching on LinkedIn or Twitter, wait till the broadcast is over and check us out on youtube.com/solutionsreview. Again, thank you to the entire panelists. Billy had to jump right at 2 o'clock there. But again, my name is Jonathan Paul. We really appreciate your time and attention. And gentlemen, have a great afternoon. We will see you at our next panel in just 1 hour. And that one is going to be on best practices for threat detection and remediation. So look forward to that. We have a great group on that panel as well, so stay tuned for that. Thank you, and again, have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. All the
Thank
best.
you.